it's too overcrowded, it's too polluted. I think that culture is too quick and fast and lacking in quality. I think it's quality. I think that's what we've really lost in the 20th and 21st century, is a quality of life. It began in 1986 with Reading De Profundis, which is the letter that Oscar Wilde wrote to his lover, Lord Alfred Douglas, from prison. And I became completely fascinated with Oscar Wilde, the person, the man, the artist, and everything that he represented. And I just found myself drawn into this other world of sort of glamour and beauty and richness. I've always been the kind of person to do things to extreme. I've been collecting antiques and so forth for about 15 or 20 years. A lot of it from bric-a-brac shops and some of it on the internet, because, you know, obviously eBay's got a good source sometimes for things, but mostly just bric-a-brac shops and antique shops. This is probably the pride and joy of the room. This is my wrought iron, cast iron bedstead, which is very, very heavy to move, so I don't want to move house anytime soon. I've always been interested in exploring the Victorian period and the Edwardian era as a basis for a creative impetus, if you like, that I have. You know, and everything that I design is all based around that era, because historically I have a real connection with the time and a fascination with the time. They're just not popular now, really. Antiques aren't. People prefer tact from IKEA. Flat pack furniture should be banned by law. In fact, I think I might run for Parliament just to see if I can ban it, because it's just gross, it's hideous, and it falls apart and it looks hideous, and it's so plain and dull and ugly, and I hate it. So. In fact, I sort of like, if I have to go into somebody's house that's got that furniture, I want to wear a blindfold because I want to look. No, I'd never go to McDonald's. I went for a wee in there once. That sort of said it all, really. That was my kind of comment on McDonald's. This is the drawing room, and this is where I do my reading and listening to music. I keep all the technology hidden because I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with enjoying the benefits of modern technology. I just don't particularly want it dominating my room, and I think a lot of rooms these days, especially with those awful widescreen televisions, they just dominate the room, and they're so ugly, you know, they're not attractive at all, especially when they're switched off and they're just a plastic box. And I think, you know, my feature of the room is the fire. This is where technology meets the 19th century. People be looking at me as if I'm an alien that's just landed. Friends notice, and they'll say, "Everyone's looking at you." And I'll say, "Are they?" Because I just seem to live in my own little dream world. Supermarkets now are more impersonal, and you don't know the person. Obviously, in the 19th century, it would have been a smaller shop, and you would have known the shopkeeper, and sort of obviously you wouldn't have had processed food and packaged food, just fresh things. I think we've lost that sense of honour that we had in the past, you know, where a man behaved like a gentleman and had that obligation to do so. And I think now it's all just can't keep their trousers on, and they don't do what, you know, they do what they want, don't they? Just like you get blokes leching over you and being idiots and drunk, and I can't stand it. Yeah. They're just horrible. I mean, all this busy lifestyle, on the go constantly, have to have microwave food because I can't stop for 5 minutes because I'm running out for my kids and my job, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I just think the world's gone mad, you know, it's insane, it's insanity. And of course, years ago, people would have had nannies, they would have cooked properly, they would have had proper nutrition, so many things like that, this rushed kind of mentality. Everything's a hurry, everything's a rush, and it doesn't save you time. It isn't time saving. You know, people are constantly ill with stress because they never stop, or they're dead by the age of 50 because they've, you know, sort of had too many microwave curries or something. What I do like about the 21st century is that freedom of choice and self-expression, and also I think inner freedom, spiritual freedom that women have, that they didn't have then, because, you know, obviously it was much harder for a woman to fulfil her potential in the 19th century, because there were those restrictions and there were barriers to women achieving things. But having said that, I think there's an inordinate amount of pressure on women now to do things, and well, men and women, I suppose. And I think because we've become a more individualistic society, we've become a more stressed society, because I think people are under more pressure, and the networks that supported people aren't necessarily there, like the extended family and that sort of thing that they would have had. And I think it's meant that we've seen a rise in stress-related problems in people.
She normally arrives with her bit of line day 4 paper, with lots of scribble on. and whatever the next instruction is, and she'll normally get her own fabrics and trims and furs and whatever it is that she wants the next time, and then we just sort of sit down and go through it. And at the moment she's having quite a lot of tailored wool things because it's winter, so sort of tailored jackets, very long skirts, but she likes an awful lot of detail on them.
Period dramas sometimes inspire me to come up with designs. I find that I'll be watching something and I'll suddenly have to go to the sketchbook, but usually what happens is that starts out, it'll start life as a sketch based on something I saw, but then I'll adapt it and think, oh actually I think I'll add buttons here, or I'll put something else here, or I won't have that there. So it ends up being not quite as it was when I sketched it, so that, you know, it's just, like I said before, the Victorian Edwardian period is a starting point for creative development.
No, I've never had a client who goes through the, you know, periods of costume, really. When I first met her, she was very Pride and Prejudice. Everything was Empire line dresses and, you know, that kind of thing. And we've gone through Victorian and we've come out the other end and various, you know, it's nice because it makes it very, very interesting for me.
And that's well, you can see if you see the sleeves, it's a Victorian blouse with an orange. I like lots of, you know, vibrant colours. And there's another sort of, that's some of the Victorian blouse that does up across there with a sort of a frilled collar. Obviously it's not dirt cheap, but I don't think you pay 160 say for a suit that's like a three-piece or something. So it's not too bad when you think that, you know, you've designed it yourself and you've made it yourself and had it made for you and tailored to you. I think, you know, that's quite reasonable really.
She just lives the whole life in this thing. She will bring a gown that perhaps I made 3 or 4 years ago, and she'll have all this bit taken off and the sleeves taken off and revamped and modified, and she'll have a new trim and a new collar or something. So she's very good at making her clothes last, because of course hers don't go out of fashion, do they? So, but that's the only part of Julia's life that is modern and normal, I would say, and the rest of it is in Julia's world.
Can we talk about relationships? Do you have here on your own?
I'd better not actually. So
okay, no problem.
I've done it to death. It's been all over the press, like.
Right. Oh, okay.
So.
Okay, no problem.
I do bond reasonably well with other people's children, especially little girls, especially if they're intelligent, well-behaved little girls. I think they're quite sweet. I mean, I can't see myself with a boy, but I imagine with a little girl it might be fun.
If you were pregnant today, what would you do with it? You couldn't.
I don't know really. I don't. I just have to.
Would you move? Would you keep with convention, or do you think that you could maybe sway them to dress just like?
Oh yes, definitely. I would dress them like that as a child, but the trouble is they'd rebel, and by the age of about 4, they'd be demanding tracksuit and trainers. Children these days are so badly behaved as well, but, because I think there's just gone. Parents just don't tell them off now, and they let them just run riot and shout everywhere and climb on everything, and it's just appalling. I mean, modern parenting is a shambles. It's gone too far. I mean, I think the Victorians probably were a little bit strict, but you know, now it's gone too far in the other direction. When you choose not to fit in and you choose not to follow the herd, to a large extent you do sort of put yourself on the line. You know, it's like putting your head on the chopping block, and somebody might try to bring down the axe, you know, and you've always got to just deal with that. And I think that at the end of the day, it's more important to me to live the life that I want to live. And if that means encountering hostility, then so be it. You can hate me or you can love me, you know, but at the end of the day, at least I know I've been true to myself. And sometimes people respect that because they realise that, you know, you're being sincere. You're not trying to be a fraud. You're not trying to pretend you're something you're not. And I suppose with me, you know, I've always said, you know, you take me and leave me. You know, I don't try to be something I'm not. I'm just myself, or at least I hope I am. I try to be. I didn't really fit in at school. I didn't really have any close friends. I felt like an alien. I might not have had green ears, but I felt like an alien, you know, because I just felt I think when you are a bit different, then people tend to hone in on you and you become a sort of scapegoat for their kind of repressed insecurities or something, and they kind of take it out on you. It was verbal, it was girls, it was bitch, bitch, bitch all the time, and just not very nice really. But then sixth form was fun, that was different. So and people were there because they wanted to be there, because they weren't, you know, so that the people that you were with, at least in theory, wanted to be at school. And you had more in common and people started to develop broader interests, and I think that just meant that, you know, I made some nice friendships at that point. My parents just humour me, I'm not really sure. They don't really sort of, I think they'd prefer it if I was just sort of normal really, you know, but it never occurred to me to try to conform, because I was never interested in being like everybody else, because I've always believed that it's important to be yourself, because you've got to live with yourself at the end of the day, and if you're not true to yourself, then you're kind of betraying yourself in some way. And I think it's important to do that. And also because if people are going to like you, they're going to like you more for being true to yourself. And even if, you know, they'll either hate you, which is fine, you know, I'm like Marmite, you can hate me or you can love me, you know, but at the end of the day, at least I know I've been true to myself. And sometimes people respect that because they realise that, you know, you're being sincere, you're not trying to be a fraud, you're not trying to pretend you're something you're not. And I suppose with me, you know, I've always said, you know, you take me and leave me, you know, I don't try to be something I'm not. I'm just myself, or at least I hope I am. I try to be. Take the best of the Victorian period and bring it into the present and put my spin on it, put my interpretation on it. And ultimately that's all you can do because we can't know what it was like to have lived then. And because the lens through which we look at the past is ultimately the contemporary lens. And it isn't a lens that you can just take away and say, oh, now I can see it how it was. Because it's something that we've assimilated as we've gone along. We all have. And you know, modern values, and let's face it, there's a lot about modern values that's good. You know, greater tolerance for minorities, that kind of thing. I think it's really important to you know, I don't want to come across like somebody who's rejecting modern values in a positive sense, because there's been a lot of progress in that way. I don't think it's ever possible to know whether I would have just fitted in neatly into the Victorian era or not. I don't think I would, because I have certain, when one is living in the modern age, obviously one takes on modern sensibilities and values that maybe one isn't even aware of sometimes. And that socialisation process starts from so early on that it would be quite difficult to sort of say, well, these are the bits of me that are 21st century and these are the bits that are 19th century. I think I'm just a cocktail of lots of different influences, you know, like most people. It's just I think my influences are obviously more pronounced, I suppose. But, you know, certainly I in some respects, aesthetically, I was definitely born in the wrong time, I would say.